The storybooks are filled with retired sailors, with old salts whose ships have come to port while their mistress is forever the sea. So they sink their savings into a second-hand tug and escort the big ships and reminisce till their days are done. One such story, a strange and tender one, comes from New Zealand, and the story is true. Cook Strait separates the North and South Islands of New Zealand. Halfway through, there is an inlet, a treacherously narrow passageway called the Pelorus Sound. For ships attempting to navigate the Pelorus Sound, there's always the danger of the rocks, until one old sailor came. He had left the life of the open sea behind to live out his days guiding other sailors through hazardous Pelorus Sound. His name was Jack. Picture old Jack out there waiting by the dock for the next big ship to leave. He never asked for pay. He never petitioned the shipyards to put him on the payroll. Jack just figured he'd have his day at sea, and no one knew the rocks and bars of Pelorus Sound better than he. It was his labor of love, guiding the giant vessels out of the safety of Cook Strait Way, his way of saying to the younger, less experienced sailors, "Learn from me." From the decks of the big ships, the crewmen would call out, "Hey, Jack, fair weather today?" But old Jack never said much. Perhaps there would be a friendly wave, and that recognition was quite enough. There would never be an old sailor's home for Pelorus Jack, pilot of the Sound. The other old sea dogs could give up if they wanted to, but Jack would stay at work all day, every day, and sometimes late into the night. When he rested, it was close enough to hear the gentle surging of the surf. When he ate, he fished his breakfast from the deep waters of Cook Strait. Of all New Zealand sailors, none more than he was at one with the sea. Then one December morning, the mistress claimed her lover, and Pelorus Jack sank beneath the whitecaps of Cook Strait, gone forever, home at last. When the news got out that Jack was missing at sea, there was a season of mourning on the Sound. But the younger and less experienced were older, wiser now. From Pelorus Jack they'd learned the water and rocks, and they'd remembered. And a few remembered an ancient legend from the cliffs off the South Island. New Zealand draws its wealth of folklore from the Maori culture. The story has it that two young Maori lovers once sought the hand of the same maiden. When the maiden at last chose one, the rejected suitor broke into a rage. After his wrath had been vented, the bodies of the maiden and her intended lay lifeless on the beach of Pelorus Sound. But the murderer would not go unpunished, for the tribal curse he received would condemn him to a reincarnation as the pilot of Pelorus Sound, as the mariner who was forever after to guide others through the treacherous water. Whether Pelorus Jack, the real-life mariner who for a quarter of a century lived out that legend, whether he ever heard the Maori tale is anyone's guess. Most would guess not, for Pelorus Jack had spent his life at sea, far away from landlubbers' stories. When he retired to the Sound, there was only the help. Or was he merely the last link in a watery chain, the pawn of an ancient Maori incantation? No one really knew where Jack came from, or, for that matter, where he went when he disappeared. Although Jack really lived, if the legend is true, he settled an old score, took the rap for a murder committed 1,000 years before. There was a postscript to the ancient curse, and that also was true, for Pelorus Jack, a real-life pilot of the Sound, a perhaps unwitting party to the long-lasting incantation, was a dolphin. And now you know the rest of the story.